Today's episode of Truth Be Told is a special one. After decades of building the Wicklander-Zulawski legacy, we're entering a new, exciting chapter. WZ has officially been acquired by Red Knot Capital, an operator-led private equity firm, led by somebody who's going to join us on the podcast today. A WZ client for years, a believer throughout his entire career, and how effective communication can set you apart from the rest of your competitors. This isn't just a transition. This is a partnership rooted in shared values, a respect for our history, our people, and our partners, and a clear vision for where we're going next. We're protecting what has made WZ iconic while still accelerating the impact we can make for organizations and agencies across the world. And as you're going to hear today firsthand on how this move can help set you up for even more effective training in years to come. Let's dive right into the conversation. This is the Truth Be Told podcast, where we unlock the secrets of strategic communication. Today on Truth Be Told, I'm excited to welcome someone who has played a major role in both my career and the next chapter of Wicklander-Zulawski, Nate Frazier. Nate is the founder and managing partner of Red Knot Capital, a seasoned executive and a leader that I've had the privilege of working for in the past. He's built a reputation for transforming organizations by investing in people, culture, and long-term strategy. And now he's my new partner, owner, and chairman of Wicklander-Zulawski. Nate has been a WZ client throughout his career. He understands our mission, and he believes deeply in the impact of our work. Today, we're going to dig into why Red Knot chose WZ, what this acquisition means, and how we're going to protect the legacy while still accelerating the future. Welcome to this special edition of the Truth Be Told podcast. I'm here with a good old friend, colleague, founder, and CEO of Red Knot Capital, Nate Frazier. What's going on, man?
Hey, buddy. Good to be here. Excited to be here.
Now, it's been kind of a crazy week. We've got some big news that came out of Red Knot Capital acquiring Wicklander-Zulawski, which, of course, training firm. And so we'll talk more about that. But I know you've got a long history as a certified forensic interviewer and kind of starting your career path in that space. So I know today our listeners are going to want to learn about how the heck you got to where you are, starting from where you did, and how some of this communication skills kind of continue to today. But I got to throw out something first. I was deciding what to wear for the podcast. And in honor of our first meeting, I thought about throwing on some Abercrombie skinny flannel, and nothing fit anymore.
Yeah. It goes fast.
So do you remember our first meeting at a Starbucks?
I do remember it. Yeah, I remember it vividly.
Yeah, with an unbuttoned tight flannel shirt, size XL that probably doesn't fit anymore.
Yeah, it was, listen, I think no matter what stage you are in your life, people are going to ask you to do uncomfortable things. And, interviewing at Abercrombie was always an interesting experiment because it was a clothing store. It still is a clothing store, but there was a high expectation to represent the brand there. So, yeah, you would get some funny looks and, in a Buffalo, New York in January if you were wearing flip-flops, but it was sort of dress code and requirements. So a lot of blown out jeans, a lot of flannels, a lot of things that might seem silly in hindsight, but it did really well then.
Yeah. Well, and what I want to talk about is I know for me personally, like experiences like that have helped set the landscape for me just from a business acumen, operational standpoint. But I don't think anybody represents that more really than you and the career path you've had from day one to where you're at today. So we'll get into what Red Knot is. So you got this private equity firm, like an operator-led firm that a lot of people probably don't know what that is. But before you ever got there, what was your introduction into this whole like investigative space in the first place?
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess at the time, probably not super unique. I grew up in, deep, dark woods, Eastern Kentucky, like true Eastern Kentucky, like Appalachia, and so we, no universities, where I went. So most people had to go away to school. I didn't go far. I ended up at Eastern Kentucky University, which is a couple hours away from where I grew up. But at the time, they had a pretty interesting bachelor's degree program. It was called asset protection. And I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. I knew I enjoyed the business side of it. I enjoyed the finance side of it. I enjoyed kind of the thought of what was happening in the world around safety and security. Computer security was exploding. There's just a lot of interesting things happening in that space and really allowing people the right to conduct business the way they want to conduct it. And I was one of the last to graduate with that degree. because I was there during 9/11. Because of the sort of emphasis on law enforcement at the university, you had a really high propensity or high penetration of veterans or active duty military, as well, that were getting their degree there. And so when 9/11 happened and all the guys got mobilized, I think the university saw that as, okay, we might need to shift a little deeper into this. It's important. We don't know where the world's going to go at this point. And they shifted that degree program into Homeland Security. It's a wonderful, wonderful program. They still run it to this day. I know a lot of the professors there, great curriculum. And so I was on this interesting cusp of, are you in this sort of law enforcement security investigation world, or are you a business major, at that point? And so, and it was really good. And I had great professors there, wonderful folks, a variety of backgrounds. I got to meet some great people that are still in our industry today, that came in as guest speakers, and I was just really intrigued by it. It's probably the right way to explain it. And so, like a lot of college kids do, I sort of was working my way through school. I worked construction. I worked at Red Lobster for 3 years. I did a lot of like fun, sort of college related. Later, and then my senior year, I thought I'd take a crack at doing something, or at least I thought was sort of in the vein of what my degree was in. And so I went down to Target in Hamburg Pavilion. It's in Lexington, Kentucky. That was my first retail job. I started as a floor detective there at Target, and just had a great experience there. I loved the curriculum at Target. This would have been shortly after 9/11, 2001, 2002, and learned a lot about retail, about merchandising, about people, about cash management, about inventory. And I just have always been sort of naturally curious. I like doing things I don't understand. I like taking things that are really complex and making them simple. And you learn a lot when you work in that sort of format on the floor there. And so I did that for until I graduated, at that point, and then I had an opportunity to take over a management role with Saks through the Parisian division, and that was in Cincinnati. And so when I graduated school, I went and did that, and various jobs there. It was really fun. It was retail, as retail gets. It was big box, old school luxury, the way that we remember when we were kids, the way that it looks in 80s movies. And but you learned a lot of commission work, some very high end product there, so very critical in how things were being handled, and really how you manage the floor and everything else was there. And so I had a great time there. I was really enjoying the work. I had a great team there, and I had an opportunity to interview for a district level position with GameStop. And I guess that would have been in February of 2004. That GameStop was just hitting the accelerator. Now, that was way before the iPhone at that point. Systems really mattered. I mean, kids weren't sitting at home, playing apps and things like that. I mean, everything was a system.
Yeah.
They had tremendous founders, very sharp guys that had been involved and had sort of out navigated the market in a lot of ways. For 80 years, electronics was really low margin. You couldn't make a lot of money on it. You needed it for volume. Revenue was really good, but it acquired a business called FuncoLand that allowed the consumer to trade in systems and software for store credit. So they were the first ones to monetize this idea of used, almost like pawn shop, but way more professional.
I remember the days of turning in my NHL 98 to purchase NHL 99. Oh, yeah, I
Exactly.
recall. Yeah.
And you probably got nothing for it because it was a sports title, and so they had a great pricing system around how many times can I turn this disc? And say it was a hot release, non-sports related, in some cases they would turn those titles 8, 10, 12 times. And so
Mm.
they went from scraping by to turning the business into an ATM machine really fast. And when I got there, I think we had 800 some odd stores whenever I got there. I spent most of my 20s there. I left there in 2009. When I left, we had about 5,000 stores. And so it was a really amazing experience. We acquired our major competitor while I was there. That was EB Games. And that was really my first foray in understanding what mergers look like, what acquisitions look like. I was in the field at the time, so I was like maybe a victim of it, but it was really exciting because we were the ones acquiring then. It was really fun. Our leaders at the time had a lot of wisdom around understanding that they may have even outgrown what they were capable of because of the volume and the number. We had a massive workforce. They had bought it out of bankruptcy in 1996 from a company called Neostar. I think GameStop at its heyday got up to 10 billion a year. I mean, just insane growth, right? And bringing in really sharp leaders, really exceptional people, and the people that done it and had really high experience, and it really helped us flourish during a time that there was just a lot of transition in the world, right? I mean, you had not only was there a lot happening in that space, that entertainment space, but you had a housing crash during that time period. Um, I think people were just really uh, uncertain, with where things were going. The iPhone did get released, and I think the first iPhone, somebody will correct me, but I think it was probably '07, something like that. People have been calling for GameStop's demise since then, and here we are. I mean, what is that? 17, 18 years later. They're in a much different format than they were then, but it's funny how people can figure out answers if they're willing to do the work for it. And so it was great. Listen, I lived all over the U.S., Cincinnati, Kansas City, Atlanta, Columbus, and then I ended in Los Angeles. And so, I was, throughout that period, I had wonderful, wonderful bosses, industry titans out of that enterprise risk, loss prevention, security world, just great leaders, great mentors there. And I learned a lot. And, at the time, because they were giving out cash for the systems, there was it was a wildly, chaotic retail front because of that too. And it had a much higher propensity for theft, fraud, armed robbery, really scary things because outside of maybe a bank, there weren't a lot of retailers that were carrying that much cash on the premises as a GameStop was. So I really enjoyed my time on the West Coast. It was really challenging. A lot of high highs, a lot of low lows. And I got married while I was out there. And we had the opportunity to come back east and join Abercrombie. And so I came back in 2009. At that point, I ran the East Coast loss prevention team.
This is this is when the Nate bait and switch happened.
That's right. That's when I met you. Yeah, the Nate Brayton switch. Yeah, we had great group there. Great leadership there too. That I learned a lot about management around um, how to get things done. Maybe in some ways that require more people than just yourself. I'd always taken a lot of pride as district level, regional level jobs. I just would sort of outwork the problem, and that was a probably the most challenging year of my career was that transition from moving to the field to the corporate office. Very frustrating when you can't just go
Sure.
fix something, right? And so learning a lot about influence, a lot about yourself, about what you're good at and what you need to work on is party to that. And so I had a great time there. I got promoted shortly after that into a director level role. I managed international loss prevention for Abercrombie Fitch during the really breakneck growth period when they were going into Europe and Asia, Middle East. I was really fortunate to be involved in not just the retail side of it, but the logistics side of it. Um, helped open the distribution in Bergen. It was a really powerful experience for me. I guess I would have been early 30s. At that point, I felt like I had a really good grasp on retail, on what good operations look like, on how to make money in a consumer based business out there. And leaving the U.S. is sort of shocking. You get a reality check, right?
Yeah.
Not just from the commerce side, but even down to how you lead teams, what's important to people. We have generally have a pretty similar sensibility as Americans, and that changes a lot as you get out there. But it's a great challenge. I love that, and was having a lot of success and a wonderful group. I mean, I have some of my best friends are from that journey, together, and it's almost when you go through trauma together, you just stick
Right.
together, right? And I love that. I love that period in my life. We were opening a Hollister store in Rome, and I got a call from a recruiter from Berkshire Hathaway, and she just caught me at the right time. I love what we were doing at Abercrombie. It was an absolute blast. But my second son had been born. I was missing home. I was gone a lot, overseas, and she just caught me at the right time. And they had a uh, really unique role in one of the retail divisions. It was called Hellsberg Diamonds. And I'm sure some people are familiar with that. And they had an opportunity to lead enterprise risk and loss prevention at Hellsberg. And they had some really interesting things happening there with their supply chain, how they sourced product, and some really challenging security opportunities because it's diamonds. And they wanted somebody who had international experience and they had led departments and had logistics experience. And they were looking for a really like needle person, to come do this. And CEO was amazing. She had, big jobs in the past, had been merchant at some of the biggest retailers in the world. She'd been the CEO at Zales, was semi-retired and got lured out by Mr. Buffett. And when I guess when Warren calls, you go, you
I
know,
would,
and
for sure.
I learned a ton from Beryl. I mean, it was an amazing experience. And so, you start thinking about when you add all that together, been part of these huge growth vehicles, these American icons, had the opportunity to lead international development, new country entry out there, and then really had the opportunity to learn from people that had a real craft. I wouldn't say that I'm naturally creative. I'm certainly not a marketing mind by nature, but I know how to use the rules in my advantage. And I've learned that from great leaders that were experts at it, was savants, like some of them, and she was certainly one of those. And so I spent a few years there. It was a blast. We were in Kansas City. My boys, I grew up there in some ways. And then I got a call from a mattress firm. They were public at the time. And they had just made an offer to buy their major competitor on the West Coast, which is called Sleep Ease. And a wonderful organization, very similar from a logistic and a sales architecture standpoint to Mattress Firm. And it wasn't fully public yet, but they had made a bid successfully, kind of a rough bid to get it successful to buy their major competitor on the East Coast, which is called Sleep Train. No, wait, I'm sorry, flip flop that. Sleep Train was West Coast, Sleep Ease was the East Coast. And so they had a really aggressive vision. Their CEO at the time had a plan to build the first national bedding retailer, and he did. And but you essentially tripled the store count in a span of 100 days. And if you start thinking about just the complexity of change management and the chaos of the digital side of the world, the people side of the world, the training side of the world, the integrations, payments, logistics. And by then I had a lot of experience on the logistics and sort of warehousing side. You went from a sleep train or a mattress firm that was very old school. It was basically just dudes throwing beds in the back of trucks to a sleep ease that was very tech forward. And although that's very exciting, there's challenges to come with that, with how you deliver and customer expectation. And that's not the customer's problem or their fault. And so we had an opportunity to go in, really help with the field operations there, get the integration done, get the merger done. I had been there about 9 or 10 months, and then we received an unsolicited bid from a South African firm to take the business private. So you think about that that's an insane year
Sure.
when you start thinking about mergers, acquisitions. So we bought two companies, merged them with ours in what we think it should look like. And at the time, still public, under some pressure from the public markets because the debt situation, because the financing. And then we received this unsolicited bid from a firm in South Africa that were offering a pretty hefty multiple on what the stock was trading at. So it was voted in almost unanimously, and things moved really quickly. And they had a lot of sophistication. They were very vertically integrated. They had, factories in Italy and forests in Bavaria, and they had a pretty big retail footprint in Europe at the time. And it was very exciting. And so it sort of threw me back into that international operations world again because of that, which was excellent, and I really enjoyed it. But I knew that Texas wasn't home for me for a long term. I felt like I'd sort of maxed out what I could do there, although it was a really short run. I planned on being there much longer, not realizing we were going to get bought out that fast. And I think that helped me in a lot of ways, Dave, because I think I have a good viewpoint on how scary that can be. Both sides.
Hmm.
The merger's scary because you don't know where you're going to live once it's done. And I got a lot of that at EB GameStop whenever that happened.
Yeah.
The acquisition's really scary when somebody that was your fierce competitor, and oftentimes that competition boils over into things that can be sort of vicious, even in retail. And some of that's pricing, some of it's how your marketing competition looks. Sometimes it's you weaponizing real estate, and that stuff gets really tough as you go in there too. And you didn't get the outside of that. And you're like, hey, we won. And then nope, we've got a new boss that nobody knows. And it can be really scary. And so it's helped me a lot throughout my career. In 2017, I got a call from GNC, and they had a need for some freshness leading the franchise world there at GNC. And I had a lot of experience at that in other retailers. I kind of sort of, I maybe built a good probably a good reputation for moving quick and getting things done the correct way. And GNC had been in the franchise business since the early 80s and had a wonderful group of franchisees, but they had fallen into a little bit of mismanagement where I think the organization was trying to lead them like a normal retailer, and they're not. And it's different when it's your money and your kid's college on the line, it's your Corvette payment. You know what I mean? Like all of a sudden, like things start taking a different bite to it. And I'm sure a lot of listeners can understand that. If they got their own businesses and entrepreneurs and things like that. And I love that. So I'm super comfortable in that world. I love that world. just personally, and I think it's what makes our country great. And I jumped at the chance, and I like the space. I mean, I've been a GNC customer my whole life, and I like what was done, and I like a good challenge. And when I landed there, they had a really, really complex debt structure. So whenever I got there in 2017, I think we had 1.7 billion in debt, and this is all public. We were public at the time. Our debt to EBITDA ratio was maybe like 9 to 1, and that is not tenable. Okay, that is not tenable, and it just needed a lot of modernization. There was a lot of tech deficit, a lot of things that had maybe passed the organization by that the modern consumer wanted, and I love that stuff. I love that sort of choice architecture. I love thinking about how people make purchases and why. I love building systems and pathways to meet somebody, the value of the product to meet their personal values. And so I jumped at the chance to do it and had a lot of success in that first role. A couple things that were sort of controversial that I rolled out when it happened, and I took a lot of pressure from the board not to do it, but they allowed me to do it anyway, and I'm super thankful for that because it worked. And so I can sort of like, "That was right, I told you," kinda thing. And once you do 2 or 3 of those in a row, people start taking the leash off and allowing you just to operate. And I had a lot of wins that year. Then in early 2019, probably because of that, I got promoted into taking over North America. I became the SVP of operations for North America. Took a similar approach to the corporate side of the business, although the tactics had to be a lot different with how we did. I really focused on consumer navigation and how we set the floor up, and we were running toward a bit of a we had a bit of a deadline because of the debt situation, and we had really sharp finance partners. We made a lot of really good decisions with some assets that we were able to turn into cash. And then we had a very, very profitable 2019 because of some things that we'd done in the corporate stores and some decisions that I might not have repeated again in hindsight, but at the time it was very important because it was our responsibility to, the people in the stores, the shareholders, everybody at corporate to basically get the balance sheet healthy again. And so we did some things that were a little bit rough, and largely worked, and we felt really good. We came into 2020, we thought we had the bull by the horns. We thought we had this debt mess under control, and then COVID happened. And at the time, we were still primarily brick and mortar stores. That's where most of our revenue was coming from at the time. And so we went from, "Hey, we've got this," to, "You get into March, we're going to renegotiate this. This feels great." We had a little bit of deadline. We had 330 million in convertible shares that we had to deal with. We thought we had it under control, and then the banks stopped showing up to work. Nobody wanted to refi anything just because they didn't know. It was a really scary time, right? We were seeing all sorts of crazy stuff in the news, and it was just a calamity, almost like Ben Stiller level calamity that could have never been forecasted a month prior to that, right? And so, like I said, when 80% of your cash flow dries up, it's just, you're in a situation where you got to do some crazy things. Now, very fortunately, we had been about 6 months into retiring tech deficit, done some really aggressive things on the retail front. And a few weeks prior to the pandemic, we had stood up ship from store. At the time, GNC had 3 warehouses. We were shipping all across all 7, 8 zones in North America. Wildly expensive to do out of the DCs. We weren't shipping anything out of the stores, even though 90% of the inventory was sitting in the stores. And so you get to a place where you're fighting for traffic until you flipped on your head, and then all the traffic's coming to you because health and wellness had a moment during those early COVID days because everybody was so scared. And
Right.
I think when you get hit in the face with your own mortality, you're willing to try anything. And so we used that mechanism. We rolled the rest of the stores incredibly fast. I think we went from 15 to 150 to 900 to the entire fleet by the time we got in the summer. And so what was a really scary time and what we were really worried about, expiration of inventory and waste and just this excess because we couldn't get traffic in the store, all of a sudden turned into a superpower. And we were selling it across DTC. We were selling it full margin. It gave us a lot of leverage with the landlords. We renegotiated a ton of leases during that time period. I closed 1,000 stores in 100 days that summer. Stores that probably never should have been open in the first place. Just lack of having a plan on how to get it back on track. Just doing more of the same didn't work, and we cleaned it up. And fortunately, we've got a name brand like GNC. People find the next closest store, and so we're able to transfer a ton of those sales elsewhere. And so We went from, quite frankly, a really scary time in May to by August or September, we knew we had it. We knew we were good, and we knew we were putting the rocket back on the launch pad, basically. And so, I wasn't sure how long I would stay after that. I was on the deal team that sold the business to sold it private. We were public up in that point, so I sold it to a large private equity firm in September of that year. We closed in October. They asked me to stay around. I stepped in the chief operating role at that point, and you really had a great run after that. We had bumper 21, 22. We're off to a great start for 23, and then because you start to build a little bit of, I guess, maybe positive track record with turnaround, dealing with really complex financial situations, dealing with tough maybe owners and sort of leadership and things like that. I started to get a lot more reach out, and some of it was part and parcel to our owners at the time, allowing us to do some things that were helping other people in their network. And so, I decided to lift out and really build a platform for operational excellence, and that means a lot of things. Sometimes it is operational consulting. Sometimes it's operator partner work. For private equity firms, for private companies that need their diligence work, that comes through here. And we've been able to strike a pretty unique chord because a lot of these, a lot of the larger investment firms, they've got wonderful folks on staff, super smart folks, but maybe they don't have the experience of running a serious enterprise. Even if they do, they certainly maybe have done it with leaner organizations. And when you take that skill set of understanding the sort of humanity of how to get people to do what you need them to do on the front lines, and
Right.
building a culture where people are loyal and they wanna hustle, and doing it at scale of, 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 people at a time, you start to get kind of that's tough, right? Like, you start getting into kind of thin air there, and so we use that and doing it in a modern way. I think, it's easy. Listen, we've all read business books that we're like, "Ah, this is so out of date." And at the time, it was right. What some of these things are coming out there, but even managing, even some, if you haven't managed a business to that scale since before the iPhone, it's just a different world, right? Your retail associates different, managers are different. The way we approach finance, the tools we use, the digital things that we use on top side of that is different. So I think we've really struck a chord. We've had a lot of success, particularly over the last couple of years. Um, done a lot of board work. I had stepped into an executive chairman role in a business because of the situation it was in, and so just it's been a fun ride here over the last few years, and sort of led us to where we're at now with you and I. I mean, obviously, you and I have been close for a long time, but lead us to this situation where we're going to be doing this as partners, uh, moving forward, and has given us the ability and the latitude to be able to support your organization and where you want to take it to.
Yeah, well, I'm super excited for that, and I think it was important for our listeners for a couple of reasons. We've got a lot of people that listen to this podcast are focused on self-development and continued education, and how can I, be a better communicator and help my career growth. And I think it's pretty neat just to see where you've taken your career by chasing it down, and how what I've learned from you too is how important people are. And so you even shared in that in your career growth how many times you got reached out to, and that's not an accident, right? You've built a
Mhm.
reputation and network. But on the flip side, I know that you still work with a lot of people today, and we're reconnecting in that
Mhm.
from a business standpoint. But you still work with a lot of people today that you've met throughout your entire career. So maybe just if you could expand on how you've leveraged that, or how people can maybe pay more attention to the people aspect of their
Yeah,
career growth and how that helps down the road.
I listen. I know not just what we can do as individuals, but it's going to sound super cliche, Dave, but I'm going to say it anyways. I think if you are willing to put the work in and you're willing to put the sacrifice in, you can do whatever you want to do. Nobody is any smarter than us. There's a great Steve Jobs has got a great quote about. I'm sure it was some investor meeting he was doing about looking around the room, and that was precisely his point around like everything that has been built, including the iPhone,
Right.
was designed, built, engineered, thought up by people no smarter than you. They may have more training, they may have more education. You can figure it out. And I learned that pretty early in my career that even though there are things that maybe we as individuals aren't good at, we can always get better at it and expand that. And so I've always been attracted to people that are willing to learn and that want to do better for themselves. And I've been pretty lucky. I mean, I've hired thousands and thousands of people over the years. I've been pretty lucky at applying that to when I hire people. And I've had some great partners. I've had some wonderful leaders and mentors that back me up in that too. And so, nobody bats 1,000, but I think if you hire somebody for hunger, if you hire people that are willing to work and they're willing to work on themselves too, which is a tough thing sometimes, you can do anything you want to do. And so I've always tried to stay close with folks that have that motor and want to push, and they have a lot of self respect, and they have a goal in mind, and they want to be able to do that. And I mean, retail's a great place to learn to meet people like that, Dave. Because um, if you're willing to do that in retail, there is no limit to where you can
Yeah.
go.
Or Red Lobster, as you
Or
highlighted.
Red Lobster, yeah, food,
Yeah. Yeah.
franchise,
Yeah.
banking, like, there's millions. I mean, it's, medical's different, right? Like, there's certain things you have to, like, have that, but that's one of the beautiful things about retail is that it is what you put into it. That's what you're gonna get
Yeah.
back, and so I just really appreciate and like spending time with people like that, and it's for me personally, like, it fills me up, and I've stayed really close with people that have either been my partners over the years or a lot of times have been on my teams where I think the sky's the limit for the individuals, and they just need to learn the skill and be driven and push them in that direction, and so I've been really blessed with that. Hopefully anybody you ask would tell you the same thing. I love leading people. I think I've done a pretty good job of it overall. I've made some mistakes. I've definitely been put in situations that were impossible situations, over the years. And kind of my guiding light there was, how do I ensure the best possible outcome for the most people?
Right. Well, I think the other part that's kinda interesting is you're going through the different organizations you worked for, and I was writing them down, and I'm thinking, "This is customer, customer, customer," all have been, in some way, a partner of our training firm of
Sure.
Wicklander-Zulawski, and what's kinda neat there, and I wanna ask you about this, I mean, I'm sure, learned interviewing and communication skills through a class at some point, but I'm sure also on the job and kind of listening to other people do interviews. But how much of that skill set have you felt has been present sitting with executive board members in a
Yep.
global organization to sell a multi-million-dollar business?
I think it's a great point. So I have been involved with Wicklander since 2002, either as a student, as a consumer of it, or as leading departments. And I've been really fortunate, either loss prevention, asset protection, enterprise risk. I've either led as a director, VP, or as a chief operator in 5 different organizations. And so being able to see the benefit of the system and down to the individual and their confidence in what is an incredibly complex situation and understanding the value, not just of the system and the mechanics and the legacy and the efficiency and the fact that it works right outside that, but understanding that separate layer below there around like there's real psychology to this and really understanding how people respond under stress, how they manage themselves in that sort of fight or flight mechanism there, and then there's real biology to it as well, real biology that goes along with it, and I love that sort of, test and learn aspect of it, and I was just hooked. I mean, I had Shane, I sent a note over the other day. Shane did my basic in 2002, and I was just so intrigued by it. I wanted to learn everything I could, and so I went and did all the competitors and all the really wacky ones. And I read everything I could get my hands on and sort of just understanding like, okay, what is true, right? What is real? Like can I rely on as a human? And my years at GameStop taught me a lot. I mean, again, I don't want to underscore. I mean, it was a wild place to work in sort of a retail security capacity. It was, the threat that the retail teams were on was just greater than anywhere else I've ever been. Not a lot of shoplifting, but a lot of stuff that
Right.
was a little tougher than that, and so it puts you in a situation where my opportunity, my responsibility to interact with people like that maybe didn't always have the best intent was really high there and regular, and, we took a pretty hard line to prosecution and how we would deal with criminal activity there, and so I had a lot of practice. I had a lot of practice in tough situations. I had a lot of practice, on the witness stand. I had a lot of practice with law enforcement, and I came up with a couple of ideas while we were there that worked incredibly well in resolving cases while we were there. And so I got thrown into a lot of other people's situations too because of that. And so by the time 2009 rolled around, I don't know, Dave. You take the systems that work and they're not overly complex. Okay. Building rapport works in every aspect of your life. Okay. It doesn't matter if you're in a boardroom, doesn't matter if you're at the negotiation table, doesn't matter if you're talking to your kids, if you're talking to your spouse, if you're talking to some random cashier somewhere. Okay. That stuff matters. And when you do it the right way with genuine care and you take time and you allow people to communicate and you seek to understand as opposed to just waiting to talk. People understand that, and that's part of our biology. I think it helped me a lot, in other parts of that world. And some of that's leadership, and some of it's. I mean, I've been super fortunate. I've had bosses that have given me roles I definitely was not ready for, and let me learn on the job. And having those types of skills and that type of confidence that I've been in these tough scenarios before. I've been in these tough situations. I know how I am going to respond. It gives you a lot of license to operate and do what's right. And so it started with me, originally with Shane, like I said, and then Walter Palmer did my advanced, probably 2004. Wayne did my CFI training, probably in 2006 ish, something like that. And then I've used it ever since. And if you start, I mean, listen, again, you're not always dealing with somebody that tried to defraud you, tried to harm somebody, right? Tried to do something that wasn't appropriate from an HR standpoint. Sometimes it is people that uh, are trying to get a leg up on you politically. Sometimes it is people that are trying to stay out of a situation that they don't understand. Sometimes it's people trying to cover their tracks because they didn't do things the right way. And if you are going to have a high standard and hold people to that standard, one of the most important ways to ensure that you're being fair and sort of balanced with that is that when you see something that's wrong and you know something's wrong, that you're calling on the carpet too. And that's not always the words that somebody says. Sometimes it's allowing them to talk. Sometimes it's knowing their baseline, understanding how they're going to react. And, you've got to be prepared too, which is part of the system. And I've always taken that seriously. I mean, I think most of the people that work for me, especially in the corporate environment, know that I love Friday afternoons and Monday mornings because I've always seen those as sort of championship time. When everybody's checked out on Friday afternoon and when everybody's all groggy Monday morning, like that's when I go to work, like individually. And I have a high expectation for data and when I need the reports sent in. And by noon on Monday, I don't want to have any surprises. Like I want to know exactly what the week entails. So that way I can be effective in meetings. I can support people. I can help drive growth. I can do the things that need to happen there. And, you get into a situation where, somebody may have made a mistake. They may have failed on something. You also get in a situation where you're like, you're not going to pull the wool over my eyes. And
Right.
so you can sort of walk there and like, hey, I'm asking you a question. I already know the answer to it. At this point, I'm seeing how you're going to respond to it. And so
Right.
if you start taking all those things collectively, right? Like between rapport and baseline and the data prep and like everything else that goes into it, you're like, this is the system. This is how you teach somebody to be an effective negotiator, an effective leader, to listen the right way outside of there, to act with empathy, real empathy. And when you've been in enough really crappy situations, that starts to become more natural because you know what bad looks like too. And
Right.
so I don't know, man. I've used it my entire life. I use it in private equity meetings. I use it in when I'm checking into a hotel. At this
Yeah.
point, like I use it with my voice, and so it's just been really effective with me.
Well, I think what's really when as you're going through that, I'm thinking about people that have been really good with the technical skills. Maybe they've got a great a high number of cases they've closed with law enforcement. They got good case closure, or maybe it's in private sector. They manage shrink really well, or safety, or if it's
Mhm,
employee relations, they have good morale in the team and employee engagement. But the one thing, like I've seen people get promoted strictly based off of metrics,
mhm,
but they don't have the soft skill, the ability, use the word influence like three times earlier in your career growth. They don't
mhm.
have the ability to influence others or to have the empathetic approach. And I just think for people listening, they're listening to this podcast, it means they're focused on their communication skills.
Right.
You can get better, like you said earlier. Nobody's smarter than us in the capacity that you
Mhm.
have the ability to be that person if you
That's right.
can
That's
learn.
exactly right.
But man, that the soft skills of communicating and influence and understanding what's in front of you,
Mhm.
that's to me what set anybody else above the rest when it comes to career development for sure.
Look, I mean, we're in a funny place right now with what's happening in the digital and technical fronts. You can't open anything without somebody talking about AI in there, which is great, and I love it. I use it daily. I use it for all sorts of things outside of there. But at the end of the day, it's all moot if you can't manage humans.
Yeah,
Doesn't
exactly.
matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how good you are on it if you can't manage that sort of human nature. And humans are erratic, Dave. Right? I mean, we all know that. That's why we're in this business. And they make mistakes, and that's okay. That doesn't mean that they're any less worthy of your respect. It doesn't mean that it's the end of the road for people, but we do have a responsibility to manage and treat people the right way and allow these individuals and allow whatever your company is, whatever your business is, to operate up to the best of your ability. And so I love the human aspect of it. I still get surprised. I see stuff that I'm like, never seen that before. You know what I mean? And I've worked all over the world. I've hired people in 30 plus countries, but you never see it all. So having
Yeah.
those skills can help you navigate those situations that are surprises.
Well, and for me personally, and what I'm excited to talk about is Red Knot and yourself has
Yep.
just acquired BZ, and that's a scary process. And I can speak from my perspective of that, of
Sure.
representing the team at WZ and my partners in this
Uh-huh.
process. But going into a meeting, a lot of people listening probably have never been maybe directly involved in what it's like to sell or acquire a business, or maybe been ancillary to that, and it can be kind of an unsettling process. And I had the opportunity to go in and go to do these, we call them buyer meetings. So basically go in
Mhm.
and sit with people like Nate and say, think of Shark Tank, but for like a full day. It's like a 5 minute Shark Tank all day,
Right. Yeah.
followed by about 6 months of due diligence and people looking through every drawer in your house to make sure that everything is what you say it is. But you learn a lot there about adapting quickly to questions, being honest and transparent because it is what it is, but making sure you can still craft a good story about what the business is. And so one thing I just want to share, and then I'm be curious from your perspective, is as we were going through this process, WZ, 43 years at this point, right?
Mhm.
1982 is when Doug and Dave founded the business. And so the legacy of our training company, but the legacy of the brand, the people listening to this that are so proud to have attended a course and have a certificate, our one of our primary goals was preserving that because that's
Sure.
important. At the same time, focused on how we can evolve that into the
Uh-huh.
next level. And so working with somebody like you was welcoming and exciting of like, this is it. This is somebody
Yeah.
who clearly, as everybody heard, has this long standing career growth and partnership with the organization, an attendee, a user of the content,
Mhm.
and somebody with just the visionary, an operational excellence that you have. So it worked out to just be perfect for us from a WZ standpoint of like Red Knot Capital. This is great. Nate's a perfect partner. I'm excited to work for you again and in partnership with what we're going to do next. But I'm curious from your perspective, as you're looking at acquiring businesses or
Mhm.
becoming an operator in different businesses, why did WZ become the person or group that you wanted to partner with?
So I think it's a great question. I mean, there's a few reasons why people sell businesses, right? There's a few reasons why people buy businesses outside of there too. And so if you think about like at a really core level, like I think GameStop or Mattress Firm is a great example. They sell this as a force multiplier, right? Like we have the right to win. We need this scale. We need these economies that come along with this. We need this sort of this brand recognition that comes along with that. It makes perfect sense, especially in retail format. Okay, there are other people that have built wonderful businesses. They have provided amazing lives for their families, for their customers, provided real value. They know that they want to protect that legacy. They want to be able to put it in the right hands, out there. And there's a lot of ways that sort of matriculates out into the big world. And then there, I've spent a lot of time with private equity over the last few years. A lot of times, or traditionally in PE, they'll approach businesses as roll-ups and they'll say, this may not be a national footprint, but we can get stronger by buying volume outside or two. And so you usually fall into like one of those three camps, as you start going into it. And so, regardless what is, it's scary because there's no guarantees whenever you go
Right.
into it. And you're right, it is kind of wild. All the work that you have to do to prepare for an exit of any kind, for a sale at that point. And there's a lot of legal entanglement in there. There's a lot of work that has to happen on both sides of the aisle to make sure that the business is what we say it is. As you get to the other side of it. And so, we've had a really, really good few years with Red Knot, and we had some capital to deploy, and we started back in the spring, started looking for businesses as well. And I took a step back and we talked a lot about, okay, what are we excellent at? as a group. Like, what are we excellent at? And we've got a lot of experience in retail, particularly in operations, things that are retail adjacent, retail support. We've got a deep, deep understanding of how big retail works and how it flows, and what the consumer wants to see and feel, and what the frontline associate needs for support, and what the teams that support those people need to support. And so we started shopping things that were sort of advantageous for our skill set. And then I've been really fortunate, the last 10 years to be really heavily involved in health, wellness, fitness. I'm not a biochemist. I'm not a scientist. I mean, I'm a business operator, etc. But I, again, am very curious about the space. I love things that are innovative. I love things that have the right to the win and that maybe have white space and that I think the consumer is going to care about. And so, as we started shopping around, we really started looking at that. And we took some minority stakes in some companies that we're really excited about that we were helping with in a variety of capacities to go through there. And then when you and Shane and Wayne and I first started talking, I just, I've got so much respect for the team. Personally, it resonated with me because I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier around your consumers, the companies you work with, they have the right to be successful. This is the United States. Okay. You're allowed to be the win here. And so when we empower that and we allow people to do business the way that they want to do it, while we are doing it from a place of integrity, uh, treating people with respect, managing these tough situations in the right way, because there's always two sides to the story, and go through it and doing it within the letter of the law, the proper way to sort of process some of these really really complex things. I think there's just some other than the business itself, there's real value to what you bring to the teams that need the support, and whether it's training and education, whether it's on an individual practitioner's level, where they're like, "Hey, I just love my craft. I want to be better. I'm taking ownership of myself. I want to be the best investigator there is. I want to be the best interviewer there is. I want to be the best interrogator there is." Like, we can empower them to do that. You get these, big Fortune 500 companies. Like, the service provides real value, not just to the company, not just to the P&L and their bottom line out there too, but to the people that are responsible for protecting the company, and quite frankly, for the people that make mistakes too, and allowing them to do it in a way that is not that allows them a way to fix sometimes these situations they put them in there without doing irrevocable harm to their future. And I know that there's systems out there that don't respect it like that. I know there's
Yeah.
systems out there that allow the investigators to say really crazy stuff, allow them to lie in some of the interviews, allow them to do some things that I just would never be associated with. And I feel very personally drawn to Wicklanders because of the ability to separate and the humanity of it. And listen, I mean, the system works, right? Outside of anything else, it's like there is real. You got 40 years worth of proof, and I really admire that too. And so I love that. I've had the ability to work in a lot of verticals that I think could really benefit from the system too. And so I've got a plan to continue to grow and expand you and the team and get people really excited about what it can mean in maybe other verticals, especially those that have frontline associates that might be a little different than retail that need this sort of support out there too. And
Yeah.
so I just really admire that. I believe in you as a leader. I think that what you've done with the system and advancing it and the evolution over the last few years should really be commended. And I just really appreciate Shane and Wayne for allowing you to do that too. And I think you're right. I think the world is they need Wicklander right now. We're in a place right now where there's just so much mistrust in the world, mistrust for companies, for CEOs, for social media, for AI, for governments and things like that. If you can be a light in that darkness, I think people respond to that in the right way. And so that's really my goal, is to continue to protect the legacy on that, spread it, way past, our law enforcement partners and our retail partners and, some of the other folks that we work with out there, and just help invest in a way that helps the brand and the organization grow to be the most beneficial it can be.
That's one part I just wanted to expand on real quick is as you looked at your career and all these different ways that these skills translate to different positions, and you think about who WZ's client base is, and the people who listen to this podcast, right, come from a variety of different backgrounds. And so I know you mentioned retail heavy. You and I have talked a lot about supporting our military partners and veterans, and not only those that are in an investigative role, but people that just need more support from a career
Sure.
development
Right.
standpoint. I mean, this communication skills to me, as we talked about, can set people up to be leaders in any industry, in any position. And so I'm excited about that. I know we've talked a lot about how we can support, those folks as well. And then I'm curious just from you, what other verticals or industries in your kind of wide span career that if you were to say, man, I wish they had more interview training or communication training, WZ would like, what else are you saying that you feel like this is an easy,
Listen, I've had a
yeah,
lot of success in franchise over the years, not just retail franchise, other places too. Food, quick service, they need the help. I mean, it's wild, wild west, in some places. So we'll definitely dive in there. Hospitality, the hotel world, not just restaurant, hotel there too. Gambling, gaming. There's a lot of things out there that I've got a lot of folks that I work with that are partners that are sort of adjacent to that. Now we'll bring this to them too. And it's just, in all honesty, Dave. I mean, every business has challenges with the human side of the business, and it's not always theft. It's not always fraud. Sometimes it's violence. Sometimes it is things that would get you in trouble from a human resources standpoint, and sometimes it falls into things that are just unsafe, out there too. And so that this is sort of this, you're riding this line between, managing the human side of our business, which is what makes any business successful, and allowing the business to run the business as it was meant to be ran. And listen, you know, businesses make mistakes, right? They may pitch into a campaign, it falls flat. They may put a new initiative out, it doesn't work. They may not have done enough research on something from a strategy standpoint and it blows in their face. What we can do for them is to help build that buffer in there. So they don't have to worry about these really scary extraneous things out there that can be huge distractions. And
yeah,
you've got a great team. We've got a great network. We have wonderful practitioners. I really admire the CFIs and the people that have spent that time to hone their craft and put themselves in a different echelon. And they're doing it because they care, and they
yeah,
want to be driven up there. I just think that's really cool. And then, the military part, I've been really, really fortunate, particularly over the last like 5 or 10 years to be able to um, support military. Sometimes it's charity and sometimes it's just, getting vets ready to go into civilian life, outside of that too. And I think it's a great fit for these guys and girls that are great with sacrifice. They're great with people. They get great communication, great leadership skills. Outside of there, I think what Wicklander does is a natural fit for it, and we're gonna double down on that and make sure that we're being as supportive of their success as possible. These guys and girls, they've sacrificed so much for us, and we make this promise to them about when they're going to come home, and I think we fall short on it.
yeah.
And I think this Wicklander corner of Red Knot and the world out there, I think we can do a lot for the size of the business and take care of these people that really deserve our support, too. And sometimes that's gonna be negotiations. Sometimes that's gonna be communication and leadership and how you manage these big teams in a civilian world, which is different than the military world outside of that. And again, a lot of folks when they're moving into the civilian world from being vets and being in the military go into law enforcement. They go into corporate security. They go into safety. They go in these things because this is what they're comfortable on. This is their MO, right? Like they're like, I am part of my job as protector. And that's really honorable, I think, and I'm happy to support that.
And that's great. And I'm going to give you one last kind of question here. That's, as you mentioned earlier, when people are you're going through an acquisition of some sort, there's a change in leadership and any of that, it can be really unsettling, not just for the team, but for people that have trusted a brand forever,
Mhm.
right? If all of a sudden Starbucks changes their logo, people think the coffee tastes different. So
Right,
there's
sure, yeah.
you want
Mhm.
consistency, but you also want growth. And so, Dave Zulawski and Doug Wicklander founded the company in 1982. Thank God for them for doing that and stepping out and creating this platform, which is awesome. They were innovative back then. They created this laser disc technology that was well before
Right.
in its prime. And so we've always had these kind of iterations of what can we do next? And, several years ago, we created a program called The Link, which was this kind of simulated interview program to start to embrace more technology. And so I know there's some things that we've talked about as a group that we're really excited. So people listening, coming soon, a lot of really cool ways to embrace
Mhm.
technology, a new program, some really cool stuff to look at in the future. But the question I want to kind of leave you with is this, truth be told. So people wondering, all right, what does this mean for WZ? Like, is this still the same? Is this still the same company? Is this still the same foundational elements, or should we be concerned about this legacy? I know how I would answer that, but obviously as the chairman of somebody taking over kind of the reins here, what is
Sure.
your thoughts from Red Knot's perspective?
Listen, I think the mechanics of what Doug and Dave built are timeless for a reason. And again, I know I mentioned this earlier, but I love the science of it. I love the psychology of it. I love the biology of it, and I love the integrity of it. That's never going to change. Are there things that we need to do to advance the system? Yeah, sure. Sure. Sensibilities change. The people that need these skills change. How they learn changes. That's changed a lot over the last 10 years, how people absorb information. So there are things like that that'll drive. I have a real desire. I think you guys have done a great job with CFI. I think you've done a great job with CFI Evolved. I kind of have a desire in my head to take it even further than that. I want to make sure that it is reflective of how we talk about it and that the designation is elite and that can help people move their careers forward, help them be more effective leaders and partners and friends, I think. And I think we've got the opportunity to do that and provide some curriculum that may be a little bit out of the norm, but can help advance them as leaders in their craft out there too. And I've seen that work really well out there in the past. And then I've got one really interesting thing that I'm probably not going to share on the podcast that I would just say everybody to buckle into. I think when you have 42 years worth of case reports and video and science and just humanity in there, the organization has something that cannot be replicated by anybody else, any competitor. Anybody will start today, even in 40 years, they couldn't replicate it. And we've got some pretty aggressive designs on how we're going to use that and make our teams and our practitioners and our partners even more effective in how they're approaching their business. And so a lot to come there. Some of it's going to take some time, be really aggressive, and then some of it they'll start to feel here really quickly.
Yeah. Well, I'm super excited. I'm glad we were able to connect for the longevity of the business and for my growth, for the company's growth, and for people out there, and to, I think, fulfill a passion you have too, which was important for us to find that right partner. So
Agree.
I'm excited. For those of you listening, we will link in the show notes a little bit more about Red Knot, so you can learn more about kind of Nate's work and his team's work there, more about WZ, of course, and then also our recent press release that gives you some more information on what this transition looks like, and more to come. This is just the kind of the tip here of the
Right.
iceberg. We've got a whole bunch of stuff we're excited to get into and excited to share that. So, but thanks, Nate. Appreciate you giving us some time and letting people get a little bit more comfortable and excited about what's coming next for
Yeah.
WZ and Midnight.
Again, Dave, I'm thrilled. The team's thrilled. We're committed to the organization, and we're committed to the folks that have put 40 years worth of trust in the organization too. And
Yeah,
so it's going to be exciting ride ahead. We're looking forward to the next 40 years ahead
yeah,
and being the best in the business. And yeah, and just know that it's our group is here to support. And it doesn't
yeah.
matter the vertical out there that and sometimes that might not be traditional, um, just what Wicklander does. Sometimes it may be things off that you need expertise. And that we're committed to supporting these verticals and in a way that we may have opportunities in the future to bring great brands and great companies under the Wicklander banner in the future too. And we're going to be working toward that as we move forward too.
Sounds good to me. For people listening, an easy way to kind of stay tuned with us is make sure to connect with WZ, Nate, myself on LinkedIn. We'll put everything in the notes, but stay connected because I have a feeling we'll be dropping more and more exciting information in the coming weeks, months, and year ahead. So stay tuned, onward, and thanks for listening to this episode of Truth Be Told. To help more listeners find our show, please provide us a rating, give us a follow, and share this episode with your colleagues. For the latest news and to engage with our guests, follow Truth Be Told on your favorite social media apps. And don't forget, we are available on all major platforms, including Apple, Spotify, and watch a video of this episode on YouTube. On behalf of our guests and valued sponsors, thanks again for listening to this episode of Truth Be Told.